Kevin McLellan is the founder of HIPAA Clarity, and he is here to help your firm master compliance with HIPAA. Hi, I'm Emily LaRouche. Are you ready to make the journey from lawyer to entrepreneur? Every week, I'm sitting down with people who have mastered the art of running a business and want to share with you the lessons they've learned along the way. Join me as we experience the highs, the lows, and everything in between as we learn, share, and grow together. Welcome to Share the Love. Kevin, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. It's good to be here.
So, HIPAA is a boring subject. I know it is, but stay tuned, lawyers, because it's something we all have to comply with. What got you into HIPAA in the first place?
Yeah, it's kind of a dry subject, but years ago, I was working in the IT department of Methodist Healthcare here in Tennessee, which is one of our largest hospital systems here in Tennessee. And HIPAA was just coming out at that time, and so the IT people we were assigned HIPAA compliance. So I kind of learned about it from the inside at that time, and after that, I left the hospital and started working with smaller clinics and doctors' offices here in the Tennessee area, and grew from there.
At Back Office Betty's, when we wanted to make sure that all of our systems and processes were HIPAA compliant, we called in Kevin with HIPAA Clarity to come help us out. And he's been so valuable to us. I asked him to come here and help all of you out today. So, Kevin, can you talk to us about a couple of the high-level things that we need to be looking for to make sure we're in compliance?
Sure, sure. One of the best places to start is simply to sit down and even if it's just on the back of an envelope, make a list of the patient health, or actually it's called protected health information, PHI, that you might have responsibility for. You can dig a little deeper, look and think about your computer systems. Remember that PHI can be an electronic form, which we're most familiar with, but it can also be paper and verbal as well. So think about where your PHI is, and are you protecting it carefully? Another thing to think about probably is just at a high level is who you're sharing this PHI with, where it's coming from, where it's going, and how are you transmitting it? Is it through electronic means, through telephone? It can be shared. It can be shared appropriately and legally. We just have to make sure that we safeguard everything appropriately.
Awesome. So even something so simple as if you're still writing down old-fashioned messages and someone calls in and says, hey, I've got a workman's comp claim. I slipped, broke my back, and Blue Cross isn't paying for anything. And, and then I got sick, and all these things are happening. They've already given you several pieces of PHI.
That's correct. Yes. And I guess maybe even starting back a little bit further, what is PHI? Remember, we could probably talk about it for a long time, but at the most basic level, as many people are aware, it's going to be in an individual identifier, like someone's name, as well as health information, like you just mentioned. So if you put those two things together, the individual identifier, name, address, social security number, things like that, as well as health information, such as an injury or a medication, a doctor's visit, things like that, you'll have PHI, exactly.
Okay. And so if there's firms out there that are still doing handwritten messages, I know there's got to be some out there that are old school. You've got protected health information on paper floating around the office. What's a better way to handle that?
Well, it can be risky to make sure, the best way to kind of think about it is, what are we doing with this paper? Where does it end up? Are we destroying it at the end of the day? Is it a short-term note? If it's a secured facility, it's another good thing to think about with HIPAA is to remember that that your office or your facility actually comes under HIPAA and needs to be safeguarded as well. And it doesn't need to be like a bank or Fort Knox. You simply need to be aware of who's there. Do we have any visitors there? Are the doors locked at the end of the day? That kind of thing. So a lot of people are taking, written hand notes and putting them on the computer, for safekeeping, however.
So it might be better to have a secure program that you're doing all of your input into. So that way the data goes right into the secure program. It's password protected. It's not floating about the office.
That's correct. That's exactly right. Yes. Yeah. Things will get misplaced with paper. Especially when HIPAA first came out, many doctors' offices had a lot of trouble with a lot of the paper PHI that was floating around the office. And it was, kind of a big housekeeping challenge for them. A lot of things now are electronic, so it makes things a little bit easier to take care of and to track, to see who looked at it, to see, that it's backed up, that it's safeguarded, and all that kind of thing. Sure.
One of the things that we talked about when we did our HIPAA audit on Back Office Betty's was resting data versus data in transit. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Sure. A lot of times we're sharing PHI across a network or with someone outside of our organization, right? And maybe that's through the cloud, through a software program, things like that. That can be done correctly, and it can be done, in a compliant manner. Normally, that's what we would call data in transit. Okay, and normally that needs to be encrypted. Okay, many people are able to successfully encrypt that simply by using what they call, without getting too technical, the HTTPS protocol,
Okay.
which is very similar. It's the same kind of protocol that we use when we buy something with a credit card at Amazon or for something like a place like that. So data at rest, a little similar. This is going to be the data, the PHI that is actually in a database, right? It could also be on your local computer, on your laptop. It could be in a little thumb drive. It could be anywhere in your office where you have a computer storage system. And that needs to be protected as well, usually with encryption. Exactly.
Okay, so if our software vendor, so people, a lot of our attorneys might use something like MyCase, Lexicata, Clio. If you're logging in and it's HTTPS, they're using, generally it's pretty secure, more than an HTTP. Is that
That's
right?
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And most of those vendors you mentioned, I haven't studied them closely, but I certainly believe that they have implemented that level of encryption. So that you're right, exactly. When you log in, you're challenged with a username and password, which identifies you, which is great. And then the connection itself is HTTPS, which is encryption, and it meets the standard. Exactly.
Awesome. What are a couple other tips that you might give to a small firm where everyone's in the office? They might be chatting about protected health information. What are some tips on how to mitigate your risk?
Right, right. Well, just remember, there's the privacy rule, and I think in the government's language, the HIPAA is to encourage an attitude or an atmosphere of professionalism and privacy when it comes to patient information. Right. As hard as we may try, we have to remember, I think, that this information, in a sense, does belong to the patient as well, and we have to treat it with respect. So, we can share it with other people, but we have to make sure that the safeguards are in place, and always make sure that these safeguards are compliant. And I think those will help out most firms who are in this business. Yes.
Wonderful. And I know personally, I was pretty scared when I first had our HIPAA audit. I thought, HIPAA's out to get us all. They're looking to fine everyone. And really, I have to say that you just calmed me down and made me say, this is really about protecting patients. It's not about an organization out to get businesses.
Right. That's correct. And I think, it's also worth remembering, too, that a lot of companies or organizations that have had problems with HIPAA have started those problems, because they've made their customers mad, right? So, in a kind of common sense terms, if we keep our patients and our customers happy when we're sharing, when we're using their PHI and treat them with respect and confidentiality, that will go a long way toward making sure that everyone's happy and no complaints will ever be filed. So.
Perfect. It sounds like a case of the squeaky wheel will get the grease.
Yes, sometimes it is. Exactly.
So
Yes.
keep your wheels lubed up so they're not squeaking. Make sure that your employees know, to keep their lips tight when it comes to protected patient information, and it's a need to know kind of a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Usually there's no need to share it outside the facility, and is to make sure that it's always treated with confidentiality and respect, just like we would treat our own personal health information, treat others as well. Sure.
Wonderful. And I believe there's a document that law firms should be getting when they are working with vendors, such as like a receptionist company, to make sure that they're protected. What's that?
Right. The key document that kind of gives shape to this entire relationship is the business associate agreement. Okay. It is a required HIPAA document. And it's not that complicated. It's usually a 3 or 4 page document, and it simply puts into writing some of the promises that the business associate makes in order to safeguard and protect the PHI. So most of the business associates agreements that I've seen across the country are pretty darn similar. So because the HIPAA requires that we protect and safeguard PHI mostly the same way. So that business associate agreement is a required contract. So it is important to have those in place with any vendors who are hosting or receiving or transmitting or managing some of your PHI.
So for a law firm who might use like an outsourced paralegal, someone that they do a 1099, would it be appropriate to get a BAA with that paralegal or that 1099 contract employee?
Yes, it would be appropriate. Absolutely. Normally, I think the language in some of the regulations is that it needs to be part of your workforce, and I don't think 1099 employees would fall under that definition. So they're going to be more like outside of your organization, even if they're on site with you every day, and they would require a business associate agreement. Yes.
Wonderful. So any contractors, any vendors that you're using, make sure you have that BAA in place. If you're using a virtual receptionist company and they're doing intake, they might be hearing that kind of sensitive information. Even if you're not asking them to obtain it, they may hear it. So make sure that they've signed the BAA, that you're protected. If your law firm, if you're not sure that you're HIPAA compliant, call Kevin with HIPAA Clarity. Ask him to do an audit for you. It's very reasonable. It's something we should all do. Make sure we're just playing it safe.
Great. Yes. As you and I discovered as we walked through the business associate agreement, it's really nothing to be afraid of. It just simply kind of puts in writing a lot of the things that you may already be doing, but it's important to have the agreement in place.
Absolutely. And I love that I can introduce the HIPAA compliance program to our team now, and I can explain to them the whys of what we're doing and why it's so important to protect patient information, and just put a protocol in place so that if we ever do get audited, we can say absolutely we do have a HIPAA compliance program.
Right, exactly. Another key part of the program too, even for smaller organizations, is to have some awareness training, which Emily has done with her company, and I helped her out with that. It's kind of a HIPAA requirement and doesn't need to be anything elaborate, but it's important that all of the workforce members have a little awareness training about their responsibilities regarding PHI and HIPAA.
Absolutely. So Kevin, if our viewers want to get in touch with you, they need their own HIPAA audit, how would they reach out to you?
Well, I'd love to hear from them. I can be reached. You can read a little bit about me and my company and my services at my website, which is HIPAAclarity.com, HIPAAClarity.com, HIPAA Clarity. And my email on the website is info@HIPAAclarity.com. And a little bit more about me is on LinkedIn under Kevin McLellan.
Wonderful. Kevin, I've got some rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
What is the last good book you read?
Oh, wow. I've just been reading a lot about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So,
oh my gosh. That makes my head want to explode.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but it's a lot of fun. I think I may have bought about $10 worth of Bitcoin, but I'm not sure what it's worth now, but we'll see. So
awesome. Well, word on the street is you'll be a billionaire next week.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I hope so. Yeah.
If you're not working, what are you doing for fun?
Oh, well, me and my wife, we have a pretty big yard, and springtime is coming here in Tennessee. So we like to get out there and work in our yard and play in the garden and that kind of thing.
Awesome. What's the best vacation you ever took?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow. I was thinking about my honeymoon a couple years ago. We took a cruise into the Caribbean, so it was a lot of fun.
That sounds delightful.
Well,
there you have it. HIPAA Clarity. If you haven't audited your firm, reach out to Kevin, get an audit done, make sure that you're in compliance. Thank you so much for being here, Kevin.
My pleasure. Look forward to hearing from people.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Share the Love. Make sure to give us a thumbs up, share, and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and Google Play to get the latest content.